Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Circle of the World podcast, where we discuss Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. I am one of your hosts, Lord Chamberlain Jeffrey, and here are my co-hosts.
Archlector George.
And Harrison, the Adeptus Historical.
We continue our coverage of Last Argument of Kings, the third book in the original trilogy. And for this episode, we're covering Loose Ends and the Beginning. So, let's get started. First things first, want to point out a little snafu that was made last episode. Harrison's outro, he said we're covering loose ends and does the devil know he's a devil? Actually, it's the beginning. Harrison got flustered and confused by...
I was not flustered, Jeffrey. I read what was... Hey, all listeners, I know you guys listen to Audible. Go on to Audible and look all the way at the end of Last Argument of Kings, and you'll see that it says, does the devil know he's the devil? Even though Pacey says, chapter blah, 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 the beginning. Super weird.
Well, you're forgiven for that, okay?
Thanks, Papa.
Well, no problemo. So we'll also, we don't want to do the usual. We want to thank you, the listeners, for your continued support. We're at the end of the third book, which is fantastic. We'll be doing our spoiler episode next week, and then our spoiler review, of the trilogy at this point, right? And then we have a couple guest spots, right? Boys, you want to lay out the schedule, so to speak?
I mean, it's not completely set in stone at the moment, but next week will be the spoiler episode, right, Harrison?
Yes.
So we're going to be covering the entire trilogy, spoilers and all, so we can actually talk about some of the things that we weren't able to talk about at the time. Mm-hmm. So that'll be good, I think. We go back and talk about moments that we were kind of all just like behind our mics going, should we say something here? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Or in my case, I just said it and we had to cut it out.
No, exactly.
Yeah, that's happened. And then so after that, we have some guest spots. We got some fun stuff lined up, and then we'll start our coverage of the standalones. After that, starting with Best Served Cold, we might switch it up. Try to give you a little razzle dazzle. And then we'll see what happens. And we just want to remind you all to follow us on YouTube's, our social medias. Oh, and don't forget about the giveaway, boys.
Definitely not. So, if you didn't know, if you didn't listen to last week's episode for some reason, we're giving away a signed, numbered copy of The Great Change and Other Lies. And in order to enter, thanks, Harrison. They can't hear that.
I know they can.
So, if you want to enter with for a chance to win, just share any of the social media posts that we put up. I didn't make this clear last time when I said each share is a chance to win. What I meant really was a share on each platform is a chance to win, because somebody was sharing on like 3 platforms every day, and I said, this is really great and we really appreciate it, but you don't have to do this and you're not getting any more chances. So sorry about that.
Wait, no, if he shares 3 on 3 platforms,
so he gets three chances, but he was sharing on 3 platforms every day.
Isn't that fine? That's fine. That's what we want.
No, but we don't want one guy with like 50 chances to win and everybody else with like 2.
Well, let's just up the ante. Everybody needs to share as much as possible.
Well, I didn't want to mislead anyone. That was all.
All right. Just remember to tag us, our accounts, and to use the hashtag COTW giveaway.
Yes.
That's important because we can't keep track if you don't tag us and use that hashtag. So,
and special thanks to the the kind of emails that we've been getting as well for people who don't have social media. Those have been very sweet. So even if you guys don't win it, thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, and keep those emails coming, please. Those are fun to read. I like them. All right, so let's get started with our first chapter read-through, and this is Loose Ends. This is Glocta's final chapter in the trilogy. Dun, dun, dun.
His final form.
He is fully enmeshed in his arch-lectorness. And so we start off from his perspective, and he's in a white a room with the 4 white walls, table, and 2 chairs. We know what this is. This is the ubiquitous torture rooms, that the interrogation rooms. That's the official name.
Man, those have got to be a bitch to clean. Like,
Right.
they're all white. That you can't. Yeah.
And there's like a blood stain from one wall that no one didn't try hard enough to clean. They're all, it's the same. All the rooms look exactly like this. It's
in making the rooms the same at the beginning and at the end of the trilogy, like he's kind of drawing this nice what's the word? Fuck me.
Parallel.
Yes, he's drawing a very nice parallel. Thank you, Harrison. With the way the characters, Glock's character has changed, and I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, his position has changed in society and in the hierarchy of things, but he's still in that chair, sitting aside from some poor person, some victim, somebody. So he has 2 huge practicals, right? They don't even have names. Ever since Severard and Frost, they don't deserve names.
Yeah, I think he's like completely disassociated with them.
Yeah, and the person sitting across from Glockta is none other than Carla Dan Eider, one of the hottest bitches in the circle of the world. But it's
on this season of The Bachelorette.
On Adjua's most eligible bachelorettes. So she is naked and she is worried. She hasn't slept in days from the dark circles around her eyes, but she's still looking gorgeous, right? And
let's go, queen.
Let's go, girl. And Glockta, he wonders aloud. He's like, am I gonna get that letter that you threatened, that you used to blackmail me? Right? That you said that in case you died or you go missing for some for some random reason, a letter would be sent to the Archlector that details, Glockta letting Carla Dan Eider live and all this stuff. Like, will it come to my desk? It would be funny, right? And now she's like, so like, I know I kind of like made a mistake. If you can just hear me out and just accept my apology. All I wanted to do was warn you about the Gurkish, the whole having you black bagged and taken to a secretive room. That was like, cherries on top, that's all. And she asked him if he could be merciful. And he, said, he asked her in return, like, did you expect me to be merciful once before? She goes, no. He's like, what do you think? I'm going to make the same mistake twice. I told you to never come back, not ever. And then he starts, one of the practicals lifts the lid of the torture case, and she goes, oh no, look, you won. I should have been grateful. Please. And then she changes her voice a little bit, sexual. She goes, please, surely there must be something I can do to make up for my foolishness.
Which is a foreshadowing for her, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Glockta, he could tell that she's feigning desire, and also there's, she's genuinely disgusted by what she sees with, and when she looks at Glockta. And then he laughs and he just says, does this have to be embarrassing as well as public? And she just and she goes, and she says that she knows she made a mistake. She was trying to help. She meant him no real harm. She caused him no real harm. You know it. And then he starts like slowly reaching out towards the case, and she's like, just tell me what I can do. Tell me, I could be useful. What can I do? And then he just kind of pauses. He goes, now that you mention it, there is a way, I think. And then he says, do you have contacts and talents? And she goes, talents? Yeah, I do. And basically, the gist of it is that he and people in the close council, and by this we can only assume Baez too, they are concerned about what Grand Duke Orso wants the role he means to play in union politics.
And I find this really funny because, like, Orso literally, well, he was paid to do it, but he came to the rescue at the last minute, and he's like displaying all this outward like support for the union, but they're still like, oh, what's that sneaky bastard up to?
Yeah, they don't trust foreigners, apparently. And their very strong feeling is that, Orso should stick to bullying Syrians and keep his nose out of the business of the Union. He tells her that she's going to go to Talon's. She will be his eyes, in the city. And the role she's to play is a traitor fleeing for her life with no friends, completely alone, just wanting a new beginning, a beautiful traitor in desperate need of someone strong to protect her. You get the idea. And she goes, I suppose that I could do that. And he goes, you better. You fucking better. And he informs her that, because she says that she'll need money, but he says that, all her assets have been seized by the Inquisition. And that, there's a great deal of rebuilding to do, that the king needs every dollar, every mark he can get his hands on. And confessed traitors can hardly expect to keep their funds in a time like this. But he has arranged passage for her. So when she arrives, to make sure that she contacts with the baking house of Valent and Balk in Talons, and they'll arrange a loan to get her started. And she goes, Valent and Balk? Oh, fuck that. I'd rather be in debt to somebody else. Anybody else. And she goes, yeah, I know, but it's either that or it's nothing. And then I guess she starts to ask, like, how will she, get this going? And he says, a woman of your resourcefulness, she'll find a way for sure. He wants to be completely buried in her letters. Whatever happens in the city, what Orso's doing, who he makes war with, who he makes peace with, who his allies are and his enemies. And he tells her that he'll be watching, that she leaves on the next tide. She, is like kind of dumbfounded, and she was crying tears of relief at this point, just wiping away. And Glocta, he makes a note that, it's done to us, then we do it to others, then we order it done. Such is the way of things.
And I find it quite funny that this is the first person that Glocta's gone after becoming Archlector. Like, he takes care of what Baez has told him to do, like, make sure Therese is doing her duties and stuff like that. And, threatening Hoff and making sure the closed council's in order, and then, right, let's find that fucking sneaky bitch.
find that sneaky bitch.
And even though he does manage to turn it to his advantage by making her one of his agents, like, it just shows that he's still a little bit, like, just a bit petty and a bit spiteful.
You know what? I'd be petty as fuck too. I'd be petty Betty if Glocta, a man that isn't merciful, decides to be merciful once, and then she repays it, right, by disobeying, by completely flouting what he said to do in order to keep them both alive. And then not only just flouts it, right, but has him black-bagged, dragged. They lose his cane, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yes, the walk back. Yes, the fucking shuffle back.
Right, and she like taunts him, and then she was like, okay, well, we'll put the black bag over you again, and take you back somewhere, but you're gonna have to find your cane and walk back yourself. And I'd be petty as fuck too. Harrison, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, the whole thing is that he let her go and told her, like, he never does this, and she knew that he would never do this for anybody. But because, they got along and she kind of understood him and he felt like he was seen by her, they had a little relationship going on, that he let her go and told her, never come, like, I never want to see you ever again, don't come back to the Union or whatever. And she fucking did anyways and wants to act like she's hot shit and be like, I'm going to blackmail you now. But why? She wants to stay in the game, and now she's been reduced down to almost nothing. So, she's definitely paid the price.
And I'd like to say she got very lucky again.
Yeah,
goddamn.
She could have lost her life, yes.
Yeah, well, now she's stuck doing something else, right? Now she's broke, and now she should have just stayed her ass out of Adua. Girl, bye. Anyway, so there's a break, and then we pick back up Glocta's perspective, and I believe we're in his office, and he starts off this part by asking out loud, are you always drunk by this time in the morning? And who else would he be talking to except for our boy, Nicomo Koska, famed soldier of fortune, right?
I find it funny though, because you could literally, that could be Ardy. He could be talking to Ardy in that first line.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Like, girl, you got a baby to think about now. And although I think, in the setting, was it prenatal fetal alcohol syndrome, whatever the fuck?
Yeah.
I don't think that's well
They
known.
don't know about that. No, they don't know about that.
Maybe actually, since it's a fantasy setting, maybe babies are impervious to alcohol.
Impervious to alcohol.
That would be the most specific lore thing that you could think of. Like, everything's exactly the same, but
That's it. I'm gonna when I write a fantasy book. Boom, that's part of my lore. I'm patenting it right now, folks. Anyway, so Glock, he says, you offend me. By this time I'm only drunk for hours on end at this point. Glock, says, I want to give you my thanks for your help with everything. And Costco's like, man, sure, cool, great, but I'm more about, the money you gave me. Who? And he's like got rings on every finger on his hands. He's like, a rapper in a music video, just boom, blank. And then
It definitely lasts him longer than any other time period in his life.
We'll see because he says, Glock goes, I think every penny that, it's well spent, and I hope that you remain in the city and enjoy our hospitality for a little bit longer. And then Costco's like, of course, yeah, absolutely, I will. At least until the gold runs out. And Glock goes, how quickly can you possibly spend what I have paid you? And like you said, Harrison, Costco's like, oh, shit, you would be amazed. I've blown 10 fortunes and more, and I look forward to wasting another. And then he, goes, make sure you call on me when you next have a desperate last stand. Glock goes, my first letter is going to have your name on it. And then Casca goes, then I bid you farewell. And he does his, his sweeping, flourishing bow, and he leaves. And then, so then we get a little bit of a exposition here, little descriptor of how Glock had moved the Archlector's office down to the ground floor of the House of Questions. He, in his mind, he goes, it's closer to the real business of the Inquisition. The prisoners, closer to the questions and the answers, and closer to the truth. But of course, really, no stairs. We know how he feels about them stairs. And he's here, the decoration, the furnishing, the decor in this office. I would say 1960s serial killer. Very just simple, hard, functional furniture. Just walls are painted white. That's it. There's just basically nothing, right? To him, it's the discomfort has kept him sharp and doesn't want to let his edge grow dull. But he does have some bookcases, a bunch of desks that already have like documents that he needs to look over. Did bring down the round table from the Archlector's office with the map of the Union and a couple bloody nail marks from when Goyle was nailed to that table.
Oh, good memories.
Yeah. And the only other piece of salt that Glockter brought down was the painting of Zoller, a former Archlector, one of the greatest apparently, and bears a striking resemblance to a certain Magi.
I think it's so interesting that whole how like Baez popped up, right? And the Archlector before himself didn't even realize that that's who it was, and he always was like, Zoller was the shit. Zoller knew what he was doing. And then at the same time as that, Glockta is careful to remind himself who's actually in charge. So he keeps that in there, because he is at the pinnacle of power. Everybody's afraid of him. He has complete control, except for one authority. So I think it's very Glockter-esque to be like, oh yes, I am the bomb, I am in control, I am in charge, but let's not forget. And he puts that up in a noticeable place.
Then there's a knock on the door, and Glockter's secretary tells him that the Lord Marshals have arrived. And okay, show him in. And Glocta's like, and it says like, sometimes when old friends meet, it's like you pick up right where you left off. No interruptions, no nothing. But that's sometimes, but not now, because Colin West comes through the door, and folks, since we last saw him, there has been a material change. His hair has fallen out in patches. His face has shrunken. It's like it has a yellowish tinge. What's that?
Jaundice.
Yeah, jaundice. There you go. Thank you. He's lost so much weight that his uniform is just like almost hanging slack, and he's shuffling into the room on it, basically using a cane. And Glockton noted that he looked just like a walking corpse, and he expected something, from what Artie had told him, but just what he saw has shocked him and horrified him and disappointed him. It's caught him by surprise, and he's actually finding it really difficult to deal with it. And he's kind of like there's a conversation going on in his head. But like part of him is like, why should I be affected by this? I have no friends. Why is this so hard to take? He even finds himself trying to get up from his chair and like about to like move forward. As to help somehow.
It's just probably this. Well, there's maybe one or two other instances, but this is like the sweetest we ever see Glockter be to any man by far.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is literally just West, isn't it? He has any kind of affection for.
Yeah.
It really is. We remember from the first book, right? Their conversation. Mm-hmm. That was a heartwarming scene. My favorite heartwarming scene, honestly, I think in the whole trilogy.
And they haven't seen each other since then, so right. That's a huge change for both of them.
Mm-hmm. It's such a guy thing, right? Like you haven't seen each other for years. What's up, bro?
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
That's it. It's a thing. And well, Wes, he says, "Your Eminence," or I suppose I should call you brother. And Glocta, he goes, "West, Column, it's good to see you. It's good and awful at the same time, Some officers follow West into his office. We have I love Glocta's descriptions here. The wonderfully competent Lieutenant Jallenhorn, I remember, of course, but a major now. And he remembers him from when they had to arrest Sepp Dan Teufel. Was that it? Or is that, no, that was somebody else?
No, it was Sepp Dan Teufel.
That he hung himself?
No, the guy who hung himself with
no. I thought you meant when Jallenhorn was there when they arrested Sepp Dan Teufel on the street.
No. They tried to arrest Magister Colt.
Yes.
And he was like, "Fuck this, I'm out, bae," and he jumped out the window. So that's his memory of that's his memory of Jallenhorn, how competent he was. And then we have Brent now, who's now a captain, thanks to the fact that West is a Lord Marshal and Jazal is king, and Marshal Croy, Croy is now Lord Marshal. Good for him. And then another man is there. It's Pike. Glockta goes, well, we know it's Pike, but it's a lean man with a horribly burned face. That's Pike. And then, Glockta, he says, I should have come to you. You should have come so, like way sooner. And West, he tries to smile and he goes, don't bother. It's okay. He knows how busy he's been. And today he's feeling much better. And, Glockta, again, we're not used to seeing this side of Glockta, right? He's like, good. That is good. Is there anything I can get you? Anything at all? But what can he get him, Yeah. And Wes, he goes, no, I don't think so. These gentlemen, except for this is Sergeant Pike. He introduces him. And then it's okay. And then Wes goes, I hear happy news from my sister. And Glockta goes, I should have. Look, I know I should have asked your permission. I really would have, but, I just did. There wasn't time. And then West, though, he goes, look, I understand. She's explained it, and it's some kind of comfort to know that she'll be well taken care of. And Glockta says that he can depend on that he's going to make sure of it, that she'll never be hurt again. And, West goes, go ahead.
I was to say poor choice of words.
Yeah.
And we know that West is what West is like. Like, he's definitely thinking about that. this entire kind of like decline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably like his greatest regret in his entire life.
Oh, for sure. I think so too. Yeah. And he's thankful for it. Then he makes a joke because Glock notices something, that when West is rubbing at the side of his face, he notices that his fingernails are black with dried blood, as though they were peeling from the flesh beneath. Ugh. And West, makes a little joke, I guess, or maybe not, but he says there's always a price to be paid, for the things that they do. And then we have a bit of a little tete-a-tete, whatever. Glocta says it would seem so, and then West says that he's lost some of his teeth, and then Glocta goes, "I can sympathize. Soup, I find," and then he trails off, and in his head he goes, "I find utterly disgusting." West says that he's scarcely able to walk. Glocta sympathizes with that also, and says that his cane will be his best friend. That West, he laments that he's a shell of what he was, and no one else can know better than Glocta, right? And he feels his pain, and then West asks him straight up, he's like, "How can you even stand it?" And Glocta just says, "One step at a time, my old friend. Just steer clear of stairs where possible, and mirrors always."
It's very sweet that, after all this, Glocter's always talking to people like, "Oh, this is the fact. This is how it is. He doesn't have any. He's always no candor. He's gonna tell it how it is. He doesn't care if you don't like it. Even with other people, even with Artie, he's like, this is just what it is. It is what it is. That's it. But with West, he's doing something he never does, and it's incredible how it's written too. You can tell Glocta can't help himself but be this kind because he just feels a certain way about West that he doesn't feel about anybody else, and he's telling him lies that you would that a lot of people do. "Oh, well, how you doing?" Even though he knows how he's doing. "Oh yeah, soup is great. That's what you can eat," even though he hates soup. But he's being so kind about it. He never. I don't know. It's very unusual and very heartwarming.
But also sad.
And it's very sad because it's the end for West.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and West here says, wise advice, and then he kind of coughs, it's a rough cough, and he says out loud, he thinks his time is running out, and Glocta, it's like a knee jerk response. He goes, "No, surely not, no," and he even almost wants to put his hand on his West's shoulder. He's not sure. He's he kind of it's stuck. He doesn't know if he should do it or not, and then West says, "This is how most of us go, isn't it? No final charge, no moment of glory, just fall apart."
It's so sad that even though Glocta kind of acknowledges that, or they both kind of acknowledge deep down that this is West's probably or their last interaction, he still can't bring himself to reach out and just comfort his friend with a touch. Isn't that just absolutely heartbreaking?
Yeah, because he doesn't know how to comfort,
Exactly. When he says, it's not suited to the task, he literally doesn't think of himself as even a human being anymore.
Yeah. He wanted to say something optimistic to West, but what he does say is, "Those who die on the battlefield are in some ways the lucky few, forever young, forever glorious." And West, he nods and he goes, "Well, here's to the lucky few then." And then his eyes roll backward, he sways and he slumps. And Jallenhorn was able to catch him before he hit the ground. West, I guess, passes out with and a long, string of thin vomit coming out of his mouth and on the floor. And then Croy, he's "Back to the palace at once." They all bundle him up and bustle him out of there. And it's nice to see Croy. This is a little bit of an aside.
Mm-hmm.
Croy, from all of our interactions with him that we've seen, very tidy, very neat, by the book, by the rule, by the measurement, whatever. But been a dick, right? He's been a dick to West. Hated Polder. One of the people that he's one of the very few characters we see that has gone through a character progression that we don't see from their point of view.
Mhm.
But we could see it here, right? We could see it in the pages of the books where now you get the sense, the last, when he witnessed Polder dying. Before that, when he, shook Polder's hand for the battle for Adjua, then he found out that Polder died. He, in those instances, he was very respectful to and obedient with West. Not even needing to worry about like the that little that threat that West had given him and Polder in before they were hanged.
Mhm.
We see, Croy being heartbroken at the closed council meeting when he talks that West hasn't, improved. And then we see this, like his immediate response to try to take care of West as best possible. I really like this, and what I do like is that in a book, in a standalone book, we'll see Croy again, and we'll see just how cool, like how good of a guy he is, a mensch, I think.
I mean, I think that's absolutely spot on, Jeff. Like the attention to detail that Joe has for even characters that we thought would have been just like throwaway. Polder and Croy was a joke for all before they were hanged,
Right.
and now we see like this kind of real person come out of him. And it's just like you said, like this is a few lines in this book, and it shows through so well.
It's a great way to show that how interwoven the world is, and it really does make like the environment and the places that everyone's at when you see these random characters that pop up again and again, and you can see the development throughout the series. It makes everything feel so much more connected and alive, and I agree, it's absolutely well written.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so sorry for that little aside, but so back to the palace at once, and Brent opens the doors, and Jallenhorn and Croy carry Wes out of the room, and they leave, and Wes Glockta is just he watches them go, and he's just helpless, he's just confused, and he was about to his mouth is like half open, almost as if he was going to say good luck to West or good health or like have a good day, but none of those options fit the circumstances, of course. And the door closes shut, and Glockta is just staring at the door, and he starts crying. And there's that voice in his head that these are not tears of compassion or grief. He feels nothing, cares for nothing. No, they cut away that part of me in the Emperor's prisons. No way. I am no. And then he says, farewell, brother, farewell, my only friend. And farewell to the ghost of beautiful Sandan Glockta, to nothing of him remains. All for the best, of course, because a man in his position can't afford any indulgences.
Which is great. That's such a great like delivery on his thought process, and how one reason he clung onto Wes is because that was like his glorious past, and he reminded him of it. And before, this is how far Glockta's come. Before, that reminder made him feel weak, and he hated it, and he didn't like it, and he was angry about it. And now he thinks of it not as some terrible thing of the past. It's like, that's what I was. This is who I am now. He's thought of it in a perfect, like just a great travel and parallel of his character all the way back from the beginning on how he saw life and how angry he was. He's much more logical, and he's come to terms with who he actually is, not just who he thinks he is. It's just it's really brilliant. Like these are the moments that make people go like, "Wow, I fucking love Glockta."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he takes a breath. He wipes his face. He composed himself for a moment. He's trying, right? Yeah, this obviously affected him, but he obviously is like you said, Harrison. This is we could see like this is gonna be the end of Sandan Glockta. Although Artie being around is also a reminder of that time.
Mhm.
Anyway, so he turns back to his documents. He's gonna distract himself. We could tell, and
He's like, who has to die next?
Yeah, and he looks up, and somebody had kind of stepped out from the shadows, from the bookcases, and is out in the room, arms folded, and it's the guy with the burned face. Sergeant Pike was it, and he says, "That's the name I've taken." And Glockta
Dun,
goes,
dun, dun.
yeah, he's like, "Taken, huh?" And then Pike goes, "Not surprising that you don't recognize me. My first week, there was an accident in a forge. Accidents often happen in England. England, that voice, something about that voice." And then Pike goes, "Oh, nothing still? No? How about if I come closer?" And he just springs across the room. And then Glockta was kind of coming up from his chair. And then Pike dives across the desk. They tumble to the floor. Glockta's confused. The back of his skull hit the floor. And then he feels a knife up against his neck. And Pike's face was like right in front of his, like a few inches away. And then he goes, "How about now? Anything familiar?" And Glockta, he's looking at him through his left eye a little bit. And he goes, "Wait a minute. Changed. Holy shit. Changed utterly and completely. And yet I know him. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Salem Ruse."
Dun, dun, dun.
My God.
Yup. From the first book, the first person that Glockta tortured. And we remember him. He was like, "Glockta, you're my friend. We're friends. You wouldn't torture me." And well, we learned, right? And then he sent him to England, and that's, I guess, funny roundabout way. That it's Salem Ruse. Wes ran into him when he became Pike. And even remember in the second book, Pike goes. Well, we should probably talk about this later, but Pike goes, I knew you. I served with you." And Wes was like, "I don't even remember you. What?"
We were friends. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And then Glockta goes, "Holy shit, you survived. Wow." And he starts like he's just amused. He starts laughing. He goes, "You're a far harder man than I gave you credit for." And then he's laughing, and he's laughing so much that tears are running down his face again. And then
Man, if I was Pike, I'd be so pissed off. Like, what the fuck?
yeah, and then he goes like, what's so funny?" And he is like, "Everything. That you have to appreciate the irony that he's overcome so many powerful enemies, and it's Salem Ruse with the knife at his neck. It's always the blade you don't see coming that cuts you deepest, eh?" Foreshadowing. And he says, "You'll get no deeper cuts than this one." And then Glockta's like, "All right, then go ahead, do it, my man. I've been ready to die for a long time." And then Ruse is he tightens the knife. He's getting ready. He's about to do it, and then but Ruse he doesn't stab him. And then Glockta goes, "You hesitate, not out of mercy and not out of weakness. You pause because you realize that all that time dreaming of killing me, you never thought of what would be next. What would you have gained? What with all your cunning, your endurance, your effort? Well, will you be hunted? Well, what happens?" But Glockta says that he can offer him so much more. And Ruse is like, "What could you give me after all this?" And Glockta does the usual, like, "Oh, this is nothing. I suffered twice the pain and 10 times the humiliation just getting up in the morning. A guy like you could be very useful. A guy as hard as you've been, who's lost everything, all his mercy, all his fear. They both lost everything and they both survived. And Glockta understands Ruse as no one else ever can." And he goes, "Pike is my name now." And he goes, "Of course, of course. Let me up, Pike." And then slowly the knife comes away from Glockta's throat.
Excellent.
And then Pike kind of stands over him and he goes, "Up." And then Glockta goes, "Okay, yeah, I'll get up." And then he's like, he's struggling to get up, and Pike goes, Don't try to do anything funny." And then Glockta goes, I know, you'll cut my liver out. Don't worry, I'm too crippled to do anything except shit myself." But I have something to show you, something that he thinks that Pike will appreciate. And if he doesn't, then Pike can just cut his throat later.
Yay!
So they
No.
So he gets his cane, and then they both walk out of the office. Pike is right behind him with the knife, I guess, pointed right behind his back. It tells Glockta tells the practicals to stay, to not follow them, and they start walking. They're walking down towards some room, and then Glockta, just casually making conversation, goes, you look well, you lost weight. Pike is like, "Yes, carving will do that." And he's, "Yep, yeah, I lost a lot of weight in Gurkle too. You, yep. And then
You guys think that right here too, like that obviously Glocta is trying, to get him to listen, but I wonder how much of it is like Glocta like playing with his own like, oh, isn't that funny? I don't care anymore because I'm Glocta's dead anyways, haha, whatever. Or how much of it is him actually trying to manipulate it? I mean, Glocta's a complex character. It's obviously both. But I wonder which one is it more? Is he actually trying to manipulate him, or is he just trying to get him out of his hair?
I don't know. Maybe
It's interesting.
maybe he's really just trying to make conversation. Who knows?
He's like, you're scarred too? Oh my god, we're like besties now.
Besties.
I mean, I can imagine it's a really fucking good breath of fresh air for Glock to have somebody that finally understands.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, West and Pike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The best duo. Let's ship West and Glock and Pike like we did Glock and Barnum last episode.
Well, we can discuss that in the next trilogy.
Yeah, we can. And Glock tells Pike, that killing me will not bring you any satisfaction. And Pike goes, we shall see. And Glock goes, I doubt it. He wasn't really the one responsible for his trip. He did the work, but others gave the orders. And Ruse goes, yeah, but they weren't my friends. And Glock goes, please, friends are people that one pretends to like in order to make life bearable. But men like us, we don't need that kind of stuff. It is our enemies by which we are measured. And then he gets to some steps, 16 steps, very familiar flight. And he says out loud, he goes, fucking steps. If I could torture one man, do you know who it would be? But Pike's face is just blank. And then Glock goes, never mind. And then, they get down the steps. No issue. And then they get to a door. Glock, opens the door with the key. And we enter and we see it's another torture room. And we see Arch-Lector Salt. And he is not the man he used to be.
No, he's still got all of his fucking absolute disgust for Glock. He's still shouting. I love it.
Yeah.
Go on, George.
You, Arch-Lector, with a pitiable husk of a man? You disgust me.
Yeah, as soon as he enters, he goes, Glock, you treacherous, twisted bastard.
Whenever he looks at it. Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
I find it funny that he calls him treacherous when he literally sent people to kill Glock. What the fuck?
Yeah, seriously.
He follows up with in a second. He's like, who is this talking about Pike? He was like,
he goes, what is this thing?
He was like, I'm impressed. He found someone more hideous than you.
Salt has no self-preservation instincts at all.
It's none whatsoever. So, quick description of Salt. His white hair is plastered greasily to his face. Dry blood on one side. His piercing blue eyes have lost their sparkle and they were sunken in deep sockets and rimmed with angry pink. So this man has not been sleeping. He's been getting his ass whipped. He's naked, right? He looks just like a mad old beggar apparently. And yeah, so we get that little interaction we just talked about. Where he insults Glock immediately, and then he goes, I believe your eminence is the proper form of address. And he goes, like Harrison or George said, you. And he says, you disgust me. And Glock goes, disgust is for the innocent. And then, introduces Pike. And, he says, find an assistant more hideous than yourself. The Glock goes, that is not nice. But luckily, we are not easily offended. Let's just say he's equally hideous. How about that? And then Salt, no self-preservation, but the hubris and the entitlement where he goes, when is my trial? And Glock goes, trial? What? You are presumed dead, and I haven't, denied it. So yeah. And then he's like, I demand the right to address the open council. I demand a hearing. And then Glock goes, you can demand all you want, but no one's interested in listening, not even me. We're very, very busy. The open council is an indefinite recess, and the closed council is all changed, and you are forgotten. I run things now more completely than you could have ever dreamed of doing. And then Salt here correctly says, on the leash of that devil Baez. And Glockta goes, correct. Maybe in time I'll work some looseness into his muzzle, just as I did into yours, enough to get things my own way. Who knows? And then Glockta says, never. Salt says, never. You'll never be free of him. And Glockta goes, we'll see. Even if that's the case, there are worse fates than being the first among slaves. Far worse. He's seen them. And then Salt is like, you fool! We could have been free. And then Glockta says, no, we couldn't have. And freedom is overrated anyway. We all have our responsibilities. We all owe something to someone. Only the entirely worthless are entirely free. The worthless and the dead. And then Salt, he goes, oh, what does it matter now? What does any of it matter? Go ahead, ask your questions. And Glockta goes, questions? We're not here for that. We're not here for questions. We're not here for confessions. Not here for truth. I have all the answers already. We are here for our amusement. And Salt is like, you'll never have your teeth back. You'll never have your leg back. You'll never have your life back. And Glockta goes, of course not. But I can take yours. And then he turns and looks and he says, and he smiles and he says, Practical Pike, would you be so good as to show our prisoner the instruments? Pike stares at Glockta and he stares at Salt. And he stood there for a long time, not making a move. And then he steps forward and he lifts the lid of the case. And that is the end of our chapter.
Oof. I fucking love that. This is probably the most evil thing we've actually seen Glockta do, right? Like, no doubt Salt deserves it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the only time that Glockta has ever actually tortured somebody just for fun.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
I mean, yeah, and rightfully so. Fuck that bastard.
Yeah, fuck it. Good.
Yeah, fuck Salt, but still.
Yeah. He's a racist, a misogynist. He's a ableist. He's give me something else.
He's a fucking monarchist.
He's a monarchist. He
Whoa. I think that last one is a little bit out of field with the rest of them.
He's a British. I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
He's a British.
Oh, what would you guys rate this chapter?
I'm gonna give this one 8 out of 9.
Love that.
It's just got so many aspects to it. We've got Glockta kind of building his power base and figuring out a way forward by employing his own agents, which is interesting to see. And I really wish we got to see more of that, but we kind of don't. But and then we get the heartbreak and the big twist with Pike and this very satisfying ending with Salt. It's the perfect end to Glockta's POV, I think. What about you guys?
I think I agree wholeheartedly across the board with you, George. Like,
yeah,
it's really, there's so much, like, even there's so many parallels even down to the small things, like when they're walking back, like this perfectly, just like with Logan's chapter here in the next chapter, it perfectly parallels their journey from the beginning, and both of them seem to be like in different positions of power. They both at their height of their power, and a lot of people may think that they're not different at all, but both characters are different, even if they're taking the same actions they would have a long time ago. But they are different people because they have changed both. I think both for the better, to be honest. Overall, but it's just like even him walking, he's in the House of Questions, and then him walking through the House of Questions, and then him being on the ground floor rather than having to go upstairs, and him seeing how everybody is bowing to him, and compared to before, and everyone's like, "Oh, you disgusting," and then he goes and sees Salt, just like he did in his first chapter, and the tape, it's like the writing is super good with how it connects back to the beginning. Like it's kind of crazy. It's very well that you get that satisfying of like a mirror image of the beginning in a completely different way. So I really like that.
Yep. Yeah. Very true. I'm gonna. So what was your score, Harrison?
8 out of 9. I agree with
8
you.
out of 9. Yeah. No, I think I'm going. Ooh, fucking.
Go on, Jeff.
I'm gonna be generous today. I'm gonna be real generous with these 2 chapters.
And there, ladies and gentlemen, is proof that these scores really don't matter. It just depends on how we feel that day.
I'm giving this chapter 9 out of 9 fingers. Boy.
Hey, Jeff, you've come such a long ways. You used to think that 9 out of 9 could only be given out once a book.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, come on.
That went down the toilet very quickly.
I mean, come on. This chapter had it all, right? It had the initial intrigue, like you said, Glockta consolidating his power base, being a little bit of a petty Betty in the beginning, right? We got, some humor with Casca's appearance. We got heartbreaking, like heartwarming, because we see him and West reconnect. Heartbreaking when he sees this to the degree that West is suffering. Mm-hmm. And how it's affecting him. We get the little tidbits, like I mentioned about Croy, everything. And then we got this, coming full circle, right? Where it's basically the same thing as his first chapter in the first book. It's Salem Ruse and somebody else in a torture room, an interrogation room. Mm-hmm. And it's like he's starting back, like Joe writes about how people, when they try to change, they basically just revert back to who they really are. So like Glockta's position of power has changed, but really about Glockta, I mean, he's going to be doing same old stuff, just kind of he's more powerful now. And it's a great chapter. 9 out of 9 fingers for me.
Jeff, yes.
Amazing. So with that, thank you, boys, for your scores. And let's move on to our best meme of the week. Georgie, take it away.
Yeah, it's the last one for the trilogy, which is a big moment. And I think this is absolutely a brilliant fucking take, brilliant fucking meme for this chapter specifically, because it's from P.O. Pat on Reddit. It's not Tam Albor for the last one. I was kind of hoping he would get the last one, just, to wrap things up nicely, but, you fucked up this week, didn't you? But no, from P.O. Pat, we've got that scene. I can't remember exactly what it's meant to be, but it's Kratos bagging this dude's head into a book going, read. And the caption is, should I read the standalones? I was thinking about skipping them. Yes,
you see it all the time.
Read the standalones.
Absolutely not a question. You need to read the standalones. All right.
That is brilliant.
Smash your fucking faces in.
So if anybody has been reading along with us and hasn't read the rest of the books yet, don't go straight to the second trilogy. Just start Best of Cold. It's right there at the back of the book if you have that edition. There's the first chapter.
Right there, boy.
It's kind of crazy how many people do say that, though, too. They're like, I don't know if I should read it.
It's like
I think it's a joke at this point. I think it's just one guy making troll accounts.
Possibly. Because at this point, it's well established. You better read the damn standalones. All right. Thank you for that, George. Appreciate it. Much appreciated. Technically, we do have another meme next week, and it is for the trilogy because we're doing the spoiler review, but I see what you mean. This is perfect timing. Let's move on to our final chapter read-through for...
The final chapter read-through.
For the trilogy. And the title is appropriately called The Beginning. Because if you remember, the first chapter was called The End.
Oh my God. Well done. Symbolism.
Little things like that, they just warm our hearts, don't it? So we start off in the perspective of Logan. And he's writing to Carleon. He's, he enters Carleon. He says that, it must have just snowed, that the valleys are, the side of the valleys are covered in snow. and he says that everything looks black and white, I guess, right? It's nighttime, and so it's basically black and white. He's wondering if this is how Pharaoh sees the world, black and white, nothing else, no colors. He wonders where she was, what she was doing, and if she ever thought about him. Most likely not. Ugh. And he says out loud, back again, and Shivers is with him. Shivers goes, yep, back. And they haven't had much to say the whole ride back from Ufrith. They might have saved each other's lives, but conversation, that's a whole other thing. Logan he guesses that he's still not Shivers' favorite man, and he doubts that he ever would be. And they ride in silence, a long line of the Northmen coming back, and then he notices that the grass had grown back. Well, he assumes that the grass had grown back over the circle where he killed Fenris, but then the snow covered it up though. And then no one's there to cheer for him, he's noticing, and that's not a surprise. The Bloody Nine is never a cause for celebration, especially in Carleon. Didn't turn out too well for anyone the first time he went, and not any of the times he's visited. So, yeah. So he comes off his horse. He leaves Red Hat and the rest of the boys to take care of themselves. He goes up the street. He goes towards he starts walking up the street. Shivers is with him, and then couple of Carls are at a gate, I guess. And they wave him through. They're like, "Oh, it's the king, the Bloody Nine, King of the Northmen, yay!"
It's so funny that they do that, like out of context. Like, we know what's about to happen, but like we, like they come back, and I imagine Logan's like looking at them, and they're like, "Woohoo! Yeah, the king of the Northmen!" Like they're getting way too much into it, and they're Logan's just like looking at him weird, like looking at Shivers. Shivers is like, "I don't know."
And then he walks over to the Great Hall that used to be Bethod's Great Hall. He pushes he pushes the doors open, walks through, and he sees Scarling's chair. It's on a bit of a platform, and someone's sitting in it, and it's Black Dow. Black Dow's just chilling, like, "What's up?" He's got his axe and his sword just leaned up against the side of the chair. And Logan's like, typical Black Dow, always keeping his weapons close at hand. And then,
I know, I love that he's like not even bothered by it.
Yeah.
Oh, Black Dow, you silly boy.
Yeah. And then Logan smiles at him. He's like getting comfortable, and he's like, "Yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable, to be honest with you, but it's better than dirt." And then Logan asks him, "Did you find Calder and Scale?" And Dow's like, "Yep, I found them." And then he asks him, "Are they dead? Are they dead then?" And Dow says, "No, not yet. I thought I tried something different for once. We've been talking." And then he goes, "Talking?" Logan's like, "To those two fuckers?" He's like, "Yeah, I could think of worse bastards." And he asks him, "Where's the dog man?" And he goes, "Still," Logan answers that he's still back at the Union. He's trading words, just sorting out like an understanding of sorts. And Dow asks him about Grim. And Logan says, "Back to the mud." And Dow goes, "Huh, well, there it is." And he goes, "Makes this easier anyway." And he looks sideways, and Logan's like, "What? Makes what easier?" And he turns around, and Shivers was standing right at his shoulder, and he's like got a scowl on his face, and he had his knife out ready to, he had it ready, and he could have stabbed Logan in the back with plenty of time, but he didn't then, and he didn't now. And they all just kind of like are staring at each other. And then Shivers finally says, "Shit on this. I'm better than you, Bloody Nine. I'm better than both of you. And you could do your own work, Black Dow. I'm done with it." And he just shoves past the two Carls from the gate, who are coming into the hall as well. And the other one puts a shield up, and the other one is closing the door shut and swinging the bar down. And Logan goes, "Huh." So he gets his sword ready, the Maker's sword, and he spits, and he's like, "So it's like that, isn't it?" And then Black Dow's like, "Of course it is." It's like, "If you ever looked a stride further than the end of your nose, you'd know it." And then he says, "What about the old ways? What about your word?" And Black Dow says, "The old ways are gone. You killed them. You and Bethod. Men's words ain't worth much these days." And he goes, "Well then, now's your chance." And then Logan he felt it. You can kind of feel when something's about to happen. So he dives sideways. And at that same moment, a flatbow had just went off. And, it missed him. And Logan comes up and he looks, and it's Calder, and he's like, looking for another bolt, gonna crank the flat bow. And then we just hear out of nowhere, "Bloody Nine, you broken dog!" And it's Scale, his big ass, just running down the hall with his axe, and he's like, "Here's your death." And Logan just, Logan just he stays, and actually he feels himself smile. Right? This is nothing new though. You're not having to think, not words and politics. No, he understands this though. And Logan had already rolled out of the way. They start, fighting. Scales swinging his axe like in great big swings, and then there's a moment where there's like an opportunity. So Logan takes the pommel of his sword and just smashes it right into Scales' mouth, and then Logan follows him. And then, Logan kind of basically sidesteps him and then just kicks the shit out of his fucking knee. It bent the wrong way and it popped. And then he's like, "Oh, fuck, my knee.
Yeah,
and
I feel that.
Yep. Oh, poor.
Georgie.
That's exactly word for word what happened to me. So.
Oh, fuck. People in Belfast, you guys could be nicer. And so then Logan laughs at him. He's like, "I warned you, didn't I?" And then here Dow is like, "Oh, by the fucking dead. If you want a thing done fucking right, do it yourself then," basically. And he grabs his axe and his sword. And then Logan was like, "I would have liked to stab Scale right there and then, but there's too many other people that he needs to keep an eye on." He's got the two Carls that are still standing by the door. Calder's, cranking up that bolt. And so Logan kind of moves into space and tries to keep an eye on all of them. And then he looks at Dow and he's like, "All right, you faithless bastard, let's get it going." And then Dow goes, "Faithless? Me? Pfft, I'm an evil bastard, all right? I know what I am." He says, "I'm a dark bastard." He goes, "But I'm nothing to you. I know my friends from my enemies. I never killed my own. Bethard was right about one thing, Bloody Nine. You're made of death. And if I could put an end to you, you know something? That'll be the best thing I've done in my life."
And he believes it. Like he's 100% on board with this.
He believes it. And then Logan goes, "That all?" And then Dow smiles. And he goes, "Well, that, and I'm just plain sick of taking your fucking say-so." And then, boom, he comes in fast. I was like, "Oh, shit, we finally see Black Dow and Logan." Sorry.
Yes,
sorry.
exactly what Jeff said.
I get so amped still. The notion of Black Dow and Logan the Bloody Nine fighting, right?
It's so good. Go on, Jeff. You know you want to do this.
Oh my god! So Dow comes in. He comes in fast, and he's swinging the axe over, but the sword is coming low. Logan dodges the axe, right? But then he parries the sword with his own sword, but then Dow basically knees him in his ribs, like bah, and then he comes at him again, and then Logan is like trying to dodge and roll and missing all these these sword swings and axe swings, they're missing him. And Logan's like, he's trying to play with Black Dow a little bit, or not really, because he's feeling the pain in his side. He goes, "Is that it?" And then Dow's like, "I'm just warming up, baby." And then, Dow, he leaps forward again. He pretends to go right, but comes left. And then, swings. Logan, weaves away, steps in, growling. And, he swings his sword, but Dow jerks back. And, just a little bit of a nick on Dow's cheek. And then Logan's like, "Blood's flowing now, right?" And then Dow's like, "Yep, just like old times." And then, Logan says, "I should have killed you then." He goes, "Damn right you should have. But you love to play the good man, don't you? Do you know what's worse than a villain? A villain who thinks he's a hero. A man like that, there's nothing he won't do, and he'll always find himself an excuse. We've had one ruthless bastard. Sorry. We've had one ruthless bastard make himself king of the North, and I'll be damned before I see a worse one." Which is very, honestly, true. Harrison, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that's exactly like he perfectly breaks down, like, like how Bethard said, "Oh, I know how you are with Bloody Nine. I know that you know you are." Like he said who Logan is. What I like here is that, we see what Black Dow says, which is not who he actually is, maybe, but what he is seen as, and what the North sees him as, and what everybody else knows, and that the audience hasn't quite realized yet, at least the first time you read it, which is where, he's like, he says exactly, you don't even realize it until this moment, right? At least I didn't, that this is exactly what Logan's been doing the whole time, making excuses for himself, acting like he's not at fault, like, and then sometimes he will say he's at fault, but then he'll change his mind, like he's so flaky, like it's just it's kind of jarring. You hear that and you think, oh yeah, he's bad, but then you're like, wait a minute, no, he's not. He's right.
Yeah.
It's almost like he has some kind of personality disorder.
I don't know about that.
I see it.
Trying to make excuses for Logan. Don't do that. So then, so Dow faints, and then Logan jerks back, and at that moment, Calder shot a bolt, and it went right between the both of them. And Dow looks at him, like, "Fuck, you trying to kill me? If you shoot one more bolt, I'm gonna fucking kill you." And then Calder's like, "Well, then fucking kill him already." And then everyone's like yelling, kill him. And then Dow's like, "I'm working at it. Shut up." And then he looks at the Carls. He's like, "You two gonna pitch in?" And then they come up with their shields up, and then they start, herding Logan towards a corner. And Logan's like, "Oh, so that's how you're gonna get it done, huh?" And then Dow says, "I'd rather kill you fair, but kill you crooked just as good. I'm not in the business of giving chances." And so then he says, "Go on, get him." And then Dow moves off to the side a little bit, and then the two close in. Logan scrambles back, and then one of the Carls stepped a little bit too close, let his shield drop low, and then he raised his axe, and he did it in a bad way too, I guess. So Logan easily just took off his forearm with the sword, and then basically Logan. Well, I'm sorry, the guy stumbled forward. Was about to scream, and then Logan just chops, basically a fucking sword cut into his helmet, and then and then the other Carl jumps over that guy's body, and then swinging down his sword. Logan catches it, and then he barges into the guy's shoulder and sends him like on his ass, and then Logan swung the sword down, and he split his foot in half up to the ankle. And then he hears running footsteps. He turns around and sees Blacked Out charging at him, and his face is up in a killing grin apparently, and Dow's like, "Die!" And then he's swinging away, and his blade is just missing. And Logan tries to swing his sword, but Dow's very quick and very clever. He kicks Logan with his boot and sends Logan like staggering. And he yells again, "Die, bloody nine!" And Dow is just coming in, no mercy, just swinging, boom, boom. And every blow would be a killing blow, just barely missing or being parried. And then and he says, "Die, you evil fucker!" And then Dow's sword comes down, and Logan just brought his sword in time just to block it, but then the axe came out of nowhere, hits into the crosspiece, and tears the sword away from Logan's hand. And then Logan takes a couple strides back, and then he's breathing heavily, and now he's like, "Fuck!" Now he's been in some scrapes, but this one might be the worst one. And then he looks at the sword, and he's like, "You don't suppose you would give a man a fair chance and let me have that sword, huh?" And then Dow he smiles, and he goes, "What's my name? White Dow?"
It's a great line.
Mm-hmm. And then he knows he has a knife at the ready. He always did, right? But he looks at it, he's like, no knives are going to be a match for a sword and an axe in Black Dow's hands. And then Calder's flatbow still cranking away. He's not going to miss forever. The Carl with the split foot is dragging himself towards the door to let more men in. Logan, realized that if he stands and fights, he's a dead man, bloody nine or not. So if it came to a choice between dying and a chance at living, and that's no choice at all. So once you know what has to be done, it's better to do it than to live with the fear of it, right?
I've just got to say here, right? Logan gets off all 5 of his big sayings there in that one passage.
I know, I do always like that.
There's the implication of you can never have too many knives.
Right.
And then there's the you have to be realistic, because he's like, "Oh yeah, no, I don't stand a chance."
Yep.
And then the rest are, spoken, aren't they? So I just love how all of Logan's advice to other people all comes across in like the space of 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so he turns around and he starts running towards the tall windows that are in the hall. And he's running up. He runs past Scarling's chair. Everyone's like yelling and chasing, and then he jumps basically his left foot. He puts his foot on the windowsill and just launches himself out into the air. And we realize that Carleon has a river that runs through it, I guess, or at least the hall is right next to a river, way down there though, right? Like it's a valley. And he's falling now. He's falling. Everything's tumbling past, just like how he fell when he fought the Shanka on the cliff in the very first chapter of the trilogy. He's plunging. He's plunging down. He sees the water's rushing up right towards him. He says like he chosen this. It's not a smart choice, but say one thing for Logan Nine Fingers. Say that the water came up to meet him and it hit him in the side like a charging bull. Punched the air out of his lungs, knocked the sense out of his head, sucked him in and down into the cold darkness. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Last Argument of Kings.
Well said, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Boys, what do you give that chapter?
I mean, come on. It's the last chapter.
It's the last chapter.
Come on. It's got to be a 9, right?
9 out of 9.
9 out of 9.
Feeling generous today, boys.
A
That means we have a trifecta.
Yay. Haven't had one of those in a while. Man, oh man. Where do we start, right? Where do we start?
Where do we start? It's the absolute
culmination.
It's the culmination of Logan. Well, not really, but I mean, it's everything that Logan has learned or not learned is exhibited throughout this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe how, the first time I read this, and even today when I was reading through it again, I couldn't believe how naive Logan is when he first walks into Scarlin's hall, and he's just like, oh, Dal's got his weapons there, and everyone's being really weird. Like, yeah, it'll probably be fine, and it literally takes Scale running out the shadows for him to realize that he's even in danger.
I'm in danger, yeah.
Yeah, Logan is so naive. It's ridiculous.
Well, he's definitely like. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no. You.
I just wanted to say, like, I mean, in his mind, like, he's naive in the sense of like, I will say, when it comes to Logan's friends, right? He loves his friends dearly, and he does, despite his his acts otherwise, his feelings towards his friends are usually very positive, and he really does look on the sunny side for his friends. It's everybody else outside of that who he doesn't. There is no middle ground. It's either you're his friend or you're his enemy. So Black Dow he considers a friend. That's why he's like, I don't. That's probably fine.
Right.
I mean, that is so true, but then there's so much to discuss about this. I mean, we probably are going to do, over the next kind of couple of weeks, we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive in all of these characters, so I am looking forward to that. What about you, Jeff? What are your thoughts on this chapter?
I mean, come on. Yeah, Logan, he waltzes in thinking like, all right, I'm going to be king and I'm going to do things and make things better. But, it's like he's lying to himself. He doesn't make things better,
Yeah.
He does not. And Dow's the one that's seen it. He's always seen it, and he's never liked Logan. Maybe he did like Logan, a part of him, maybe. But he knows that Logan is just death personified. And like for Dow to think that, he admits that he's a terrible bastard, that he's done a lot of terrible things, but that if he can kill Logan, it'd be the best thing he'd done in his life because he'd be saving so many future lives in his mind.
Yeah.
And getting revenge for all the friends that have died at the hands of Logan or by the actions of Logan, like Grimm, Toll. Come on. Dogman's left behind. So, Dow is appreciative of this. He's like, okay, this is going to be much easier now. Like, he's not going to have to, like, try to figure out a way to restrain Dogman or Grimm.
Yeah, he definitely would not have wanted to hurt Dogman.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't have. And then we have a great fight between the two of them that we see how, like, in terms of, like, skill, viciousness, or whatever you want to call it, they're pretty well matched. I mean, obviously, if Logan goes full Bloody Nine, then, I mean, no one has stands a chance.
No
except
one's
for his
safe.
friend. No one's safe, but still, like just tete-a-tete, Black Dow's a bad mamma jamma. And and then yeah, even when Black Dow tells him, like, you're what you are really is a villain who thinks you're a good person. And because of that, you will come up with every reason in the fucking book for the shit to do the shit that you've done. And you'll always excuse it. He calls it out, right? Just like you said, Harrison, earlier. And that was, it's a big wake up call. Don't know if Logan we don't see Logan's perspective here in terms of like his realization that he's still too focused on staying alive. Right?
Yeah.
So he's not really processing what Dow says. Then he jumps out of the fucking window and picks the chapter ends, the book ends basically how the first chapter is. Just chef's kiss. Thank you for that. Whew.
It really is the perfect end to the trilogy, isn't it?
It is. I think so. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
I just want to say this now. It might be controversial, but I think Black Dow is the most moral character in the books.
Most moral? I want to say moral.
By his actions, if not his words.
Interesting. We could talk about this maybe in a video or something.
That's a little teaser for later.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next section, right?
Well, we could do so but I think we should have one of our YouTube videos when we get back to doing that. Or maybe a standalone episode, who knows. So we'll move on to our character spot, boys.
We're doubling up because we can, because why not? And we were saving both of these for the end, and we forgot that they're both in like the last two chapters. Is obviously it's gonna be Black Down, and we're also gonna throw in Salem Ruth / Pike in here as well, because they're both revealed at the end to have to be quote unquote betrayers, and they're both pretty much justified in their betrayal, quote unquote. They're both savage, like, oh man, we're gonna do whatever it takes to do the right thing, but they are both moral, like on the surface, both morally wrong, right? So you think, but actually, these are both these are the two most altruistic characters, in the series. I would think one of the two.
I wouldn't say altruistic, because they aren't always thinking of themselves necessarily, or they aren't necessarily thinking of people as a whole necessarily.
Right, but Pike is gonna try to kill Glockta initially out of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Where Dow, he
and
probably,
even when Pike was Salem Ruse, he might have, everybody else might have been doing it, but he was dodging taxes and he was doing dodgy deals to get rich.
That's true.
And that isn't right. Even if everybody else is doing it, doesn't mean that you're right to do it.
Right.
But I will say that, they both end up making decisions. Maybe Pike doesn't do it now, but he will make decisions that he thinks are for the greater good. And no matter what, that's kind of that's what I'm implying.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're both their character. Even though Salem Ruse is a little bit further behind than Black Dow, they are both the same kind of people. People who got pulled out of their homes, became very hard men, are willing to do whatever it takes, and they kind of come to the conclusion that if they can at least do this one good thing, maybe they can be redeemed for their actions. And it's very cool to think too, how Glockta and Logan handle it. Like the mirror of Glockta and Logan from the beginning to the end. And with how they have relationships and how they deal with people is like, you think Glockta's the bad guy, and he is definitely an ass, but he's not really the bad guy, biases. You think Logan's like the hero, the good guy, but he's really not a good guy. And their counterparts showed that as well. I think you guys know what I'm saying.
No, you're exactly right, and I think everybody knows what you said, because this is such a big theme in Joe's books. Like you said, his characters don't ever do what you think they're going to do, or they don't behave for reasons that you think they are, even if the POV character thinks they're behaving that way for that reason. I mean, we always see, for example, Black Dow. Dogman always talks about how hard he is and how he's always on edge.
Right.
But I'm sure if we saw Black Dow's point of view, like we know that we can't talk about the heroes, but in the
Not
context
yet.
of the world that he kind of lives in, like you can't be nice to people.
Yeah.
Like we saw what happened to Foley the weakest.
Mm-hmm.
And
You know
we've
what I
seen
mean?
the whole time. We've seen the whole time with his character that he's somebody who's willing to do whatever needs to be done because he doesn't. Not because he like, oh, I love it so much. Because in his mind, he thinks somebody has to do it, and I'll be the one to take the burden. And he does that here. Oh, somebody's got to stop Logan. I'll be the one to do it. And it might just be the best thing I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he says because Grim and Dogman aren't there, well, it makes it easier, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy.
Yeah.
Because he still, he probably still has that, the traditions of the North are quite deeply ingrained, it seems, with people.
Yeah.
So the whole blood debt to Logan, it still does mean something to him.
Yeah.
But he's willing to break the traditions and maybe, be seen as a traitor in other people's eyes just because he thinks it's right.
Yeah. Which is pretty admirable, to be honest.
Exactly. In his own way,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so incredible. These characters are just, there's something else, aren't they?
Absolutely. Fuck, you already know my crush on Black Owl. You already know about that. And Pike, what can we say? I like how we'll get to see more of Pike actually too in the future, and it's gonna be cool to see what the role he takes. It's gonna be cool.
I mean, Pike becomes. I'm not going to spoil anything, but Pike becomes a lot more inscrutable, even more so than he is. I mean, this last chapter is probably the most that we've got out of him in terms of actual character development, and not just, at the beginning when West freed him from the internment camp. He was probably, he's trying to get out, so he will say anything. He made up. He didn't make up the story about being in the army, but he definitely didn't tell West that he knew him. Because, he's in Glock's regiment and so is West, so Pike knew West as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If it had just come out in the Ford right then and been like, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm Salem Ruse. How's it going?
Right.
Like, he probably would have been left behind,
Hello, I am Salem Ruse.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool, too, how Joe was able to write it together with the fact that Salem Ruse, like, when he first meets Giselle, I thought it was like a one-off just to introduce a new character, but he's like, oh yeah, no, I fought in Gurkle, I was there. Oh yeah, I heard about you. I knew who you were. Like he was in the same regiment and everything.
Wes is like, I swear I know everybody, but I don't remember you. So that's pretty much it, right?
We'll definitely have more to talk about later, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's our show, everyone. We want to thank you all for listening and supporting this podcast. As you know, this is a passion project for the three of us, and your support really does mean a lot to us.
Join us next week as we do our special spoiler review of the entire trilogy.
And have a look at our social media and share our posts for a chance to win a signed copy of The Great Change and Other Lies.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And please make sure to rate and review this podcast. Thank you all again for listening.
The old ways are gone.